Welcome back to Midnight Affair Tales. Thank you for joining us. Chapter 1, The Homecoming Nightmare. Noah Callahan stepped off the bus, the warm Savannah air hitting his face as he took his first breath of freedom. He was home. Or at least what was left of it. The past 6 years had been spent overseas, dodging bullets, saving lives, and fighting wars he wasn't sure even mattered. But here, in this moment, none of that felt real. What mattered was finally seeing Vanessa, his wife, the woman who had sent him letters, promised she'd wait, and made him believe he had a reason to come back in one piece. His boots crunched against the gravel as he made his way to their house, an old but well-kept brick home on a quiet suburban street. He'd imagined this moment 1,000 times. Vanessa running out the door, tears in her eyes, jumping into his arms. But when he got there, the house was dark. Silent. No balloons. No signs of a welcome home. Noah frowned. Was she even here? He knocked once. Twice. Then used his key. The second he stepped inside, a strange feeling crawled up his spine. Something was wrong. The air smelled different, like cologne that wasn't his. His sharp military instincts kicked in, scanning the room for subtle signs of someone else's presence. The couch cushions were disturbed. A half-empty wine glass sat on the coffee table. And then he heard it. A soft, muffled laugh. From upstairs. His heartbeat slowed. Every muscle in his body tensed as he moved toward the staircase. His training told him to be quiet, to observe before acting. The bedroom door was slightly open. Light flickered from inside. He took a deep breath, pushed it open, and what he saw made his stomach turn to iron. Vanessa was in their bed. With another man. For a second, time froze. His mind refused to process what his eyes were seeing. Then she saw him. Her face drained of color. "Noah," she stuttered, scrambling to pull the sheets up, but it was too late. The man beside her, a tattooed, muscular thug, didn't even bother covering himself. Instead he grinned. "Looks like your boy's back from war," the man said, stretching lazily. "Didn't think he'd actually make it, huh, babe?" Noah's blood boiled. His hands clenched into fists so tight they trembled. Vanessa had betrayed him. And the worst part? She wasn't even sorry. How deep does this betrayal go? Chapter 2, The Web of Lies. Noah didn't move. Didn't blink. He just stood there, his mind racing, his body vibrating with unspent rage. Vanessa finally reacted, scrambling out of bed, her voice shrill. "Noah, it's not what it looks like." The man beside her chuckled. "Baby, don't lie. It's exactly what it looks like." Noah turned to him. Something about his face seemed familiar. He had dark eyes, sharp cheekbones, tattoos running down his arms like a roadmap to hell. Then it hit him. Rico Alvarez. A known gangster. Drug dealer. Arms smuggler. And his wife's lover. A slow, cold realization settled in Noah's gut. This wasn't just cheating. This was something much bigger. He forced himself to speak, his voice low and deadly. "How long?" Vanessa hesitated. "Too long." That's when he knew. This wasn't some mistake. This had been happening for a while. Rico stretched lazily, standing up with no fear in his eyes. "Since the second deployment, soldier boy." "That's what?" 3 years. Noah's pulse pounded. His fists itched to connect with Rico's face, but something told him to hold back. "Not yet. Not here." Vanessa took a shaky breath. "Noah, He cut her off. "Shut up." She flinched. Good. She should be afraid. Rico smirked. "You gonna hit me, tough guy? Go ahead. I'd love to see what happens after." Noah exhaled slowly. Control. Stay in control. Rico was baiting him. If he hit him now, he'd either end up dead or in prison. And that wasn't part of the plan forming in his mind. Instead, he turned to Vanessa. Cold. Detached. "How much did you steal from me?" Her face crumbled. That confirmed it. The bank account, his military savings. Gone. "You think I didn't notice?" he continued. "The transactions? The money withdrawals while I was getting shot at overseas." Vanessa's lip trembled. I needed it." "For him," Noah finished, voice like steel. "For his gang. His drugs. His weapons." Rico grinned. "You're a smart one, aren't you?" Noah stared at him. Memorized his face. His tattoos. Every detail. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Chapter 3, The First Confrontation. Noah walked out of the house. didn't slam the door, didn't scream. That was too easy. Instead, he went to his truck. Sat there for a moment, gripping the wheel so tight his knuckles turned white. He'd seen a lot of evil in his life, but nothing prepared him for this. His wife had sold him out. She had fed his hard-earned money to a gang. And worst of all, she had no remorse. Noah took out his phone, logged into his bank app. Zero balance. She'd taken everything. A slow, dark rage crept up his spine. But he didn't let it consume him. Not yet. First, he needed to know everything. He started tracking Rico. Followed the gang's movements. Every drug deal. Every stolen shipment. Every meeting. Noah wasn't just going to kill Rico. He was going to ruin him. The first step? Burn it all down. Chapter 4. The plan for revenge begins. Noah Callahan wasn't a man who let emotions cloud his judgment. Not in war. Not in life. The moment he left his house, he forced himself to think like a soldier. Not a husband. Not a man betrayed. A warrior. And warriors didn't let anger control them. He drove through the dark streets of Savannah, his mind racing. He needed intel. He needed to know exactly what Rico was into, who his allies were, and how deep Vanessa had sunk into this mess. His first stop was a shady dive bar near the docks, a known meeting place for low-level criminals. He parked a block away, walked inside, and scanned the crowd. Gangs, bikers, street thugs, all the filth that thrived in the city's underbelly. Noah sat at the bar, ordered a drink he wouldn't touch, and listened. It didn't take long. "Rico's moving another shipment tonight," a man muttered at a table nearby. "That dude's got balls," another said. "After what happened last week. Cops nearly caught his guys." Noah's ears perked. A shipment. That meant Rico was smuggling something big. Then came the jackpot. "You hear about his new chick? That married one? Yeah. Crazy, right? She drained her husband's accounts to keep Rico happy." Laughter. More drinks. Noah took a deep breath, forcing his rage down. Now he knew. Vanessa had stolen from him to fund Rico's business. And that meant Noah had a perfect way to start dismantling everything. Phase 1, the first strike. He left the bar, checked his watch. If the shipment was happening tonight, he didn't have time to waste. Noah drove to the industrial district, where Rico's gang stored their stolen goods. The warehouse was surrounded by armed guards, cheap security cameras, and getaway vehicles. He smiled to himself. Amateurs. Noah parked a few streets down, then disappeared into the shadows. Moving silently, he slipped past the guards and climbed onto the rooftop. From up here, he had a perfect view of the operation. Inside, gang members were loading crates into trucks. Drugs, weapons, stolen military equipment. The kind of cargo that could get someone locked up for life. Perfect. Noah pulled out a homemade timed explosive, the kind he'd used in military sabotage missions. A small charge, just enough to start a fire. He set the timer for 5 minutes, placed it near a gas line, and disappeared into the night. The explosion rocked the night sky. Flames engulfed the warehouse, consuming millions of dollars worth of illegal goods. Panic. Rico's men shouted, running for cover, but there was nothing they could do. Noah watched from a safe distance. This was just the beginning. Chapter 5. Who will survive? The next morning, the news was everywhere. Massive fire destroys criminal warehouse. Police investigating. Noah smirked as he sipped his coffee. He wasn't just hurting Rico financially. He was making sure everyone knew Rico was weak. Weak men lost power fast. And the best part? Rico had no idea who was behind it. Vanessa called him that afternoon. "Noah, please, whatever you're doing, stop. Rico's furious. He's looking for you." Noah chuckled. "He should be. You don't understand," she whispered. "He's dangerous. So am I." She gasped, realizing for the first time that this wasn't the quiet, loyal husband she had once known. This was a man who had been trained to hunt, kill, and survive in the worst conditions imaginable. And she had made the mistake of turning him into her enemy. "Now let me ask you something. Who do you think will break first? Rico as Noah destroys his empire piece by piece? Or Vanessa as she realizes she backed the wrong man? If you're hooked, make sure to keep reading because the next chapter is going to be even more intense. Hit that follow button, because Noah's revenge is only just beginning. Drop your predictions in the comments. How far do you think Noah will go? Chapter 6. The hunt begins. Noah knew that the explosion had done more than just damage Rico's business. It had planted fear. Rico would be looking over his shoulder now, wondering who had the nerve to hit him. His paranoia would grow. His men would lose trust. And paranoia made people sloppy. Noah spent the next few days tracking Rico's movements, gathering information, preparing for his next move. And that's when he found out something even more interesting. Rico had a new shipment coming in from Miami. Bigger, riskier, and heavily guarded. But the best part? Vanessa would be there. Chapter 7, The First Kill. Noah wasn't a man who killed for sport. But he was a man who understood necessity. He'd spent years eliminating threats on foreign soil, following orders to neutralize enemies. Now the battlefield was his own city. And the orders? His own. He had been watching Rico's gang for days, tracking their movements, predicting their next steps. They were panicking after the warehouse fire, which meant they'd double down on security. That didn't matter. Noah was patient. And patience always paid off. Tonight, Rico's men were making a routine stop at a dockside storage facility to prepare for the Miami shipment. This was a critical moment, one that Noah could use to his advantage. He positioned himself on the roof of an old warehouse across the street. Binoculars up. Gun ready. Night vision on. 5 men stood by the trucks. All heavily armed. One of them, a bald thug with a snake tattoo, seemed to be the one giving orders. Noah made a mental note. If he was leading now, that meant he was valuable to Rico. Perfect. Noah moved like a ghost, slipping down from his position and making his way toward the dockyard. Silent. Unseen. Deadly. He reached the first guard near the fence. A quick, brutal move, a blade to the throat, a hand over the mouth. No sound. No alarm. Noah dragged the body into the shadows. One down. He took out the next one just as easily. A quick twist of the neck. Silent. Efficient. Then came the leader. The bald man with the snake tattoo turned, eyes narrowing. He had sensed something. "Who's there?" he barked, gripping his gun. Noah didn't answer. Instead, he stepped out of the shadows just long enough for the man to see his face. Recognition dawned in his eyes. Fear. Confusion. Noah smirked. Boo. Before the man could react, Noah shot him twice. A clean, suppressed kill. The body hit the ground. The rest of the gang would find them soon. But by then Noah would be gone. And the fear he left behind would do more damage than any bullet. Chapter 8 of Vanessa's Desperation. Vanessa sat on the edge of Rico's expensive leather couch, her leg bouncing with nervous energy. The warehouse fire had shaken Rico. Badly. His paranoia was growing and his patience with her was wearing thin. She had tried to convince him it wasn't Noah. That her husband was just some broken soldier who wouldn't fight back. But Rico wasn't stupid. And he knew exactly who was behind the attack. He paced in front of her, jaw tight, hands clenching into fists. "Your husband is screwing with my business, Vanessa. And if you don't fix this, you're gonna regret ever bringing me into this mess." She swallowed hard. I'll talk to him. I'll get him to stop." Rico laughed. A cold, humorless sound. "He's not stopping, babe. He's just getting started." And she knew he was right. Noah wasn't the kind of man who let things go. He was a soldier. A strategist. And if he was coming for them, he wouldn't stop until everything burned. For the first time, Vanessa felt real fear. What had she done? Chapter 9, The Mind Games Begin. Noah wasn't just going to destroy Rico physically. He was going to break him mentally. The warehouse fire had shaken Rico's confidence. Now it was time to push him over the edge. Using a burner phone, Noah sent a message directly to Rico's number. "Unknown number, you took everything from me. Now I take everything from you." Unknown number, one by one. Noah could imagine Rico's reaction. The growing paranoia. The way he'd start questioning his own men. He needed Rico to feel hunted. But that wasn't enough. Noah had one more trick up his sleeve. He took an envelope and placed a single photo inside. A picture of Vanessa. Alone. In Rico's penthouse. No words. Just the image. He paid a street kid to deliver it to Rico's men. By the time Rico got it, the paranoia would be unbearable. And the next time they met, Noah wouldn't be a shadow in the dark anymore. He would be standing right in front of him. Chapter 10, The Second Attack. Rico Alvarez was losing control and Noah Callahan knew it. Fear was the greatest weapon and right now Rico was choking on it. The gang leader had doubled security, pulled his men closer, and was questioning everyone in his inner circle. His paranoia was spreading, making his own men wary of each other. Perfect. But Noah wasn't done. If the first strike had shaken Rico, the second would break him. Noah spent the next 2 days gathering intel on Rico's cash flow. Drugs and weapons brought in big money, but every criminal had a weak spot. A stash house, a vault, a hidden reserve of untouchable cash. And Rico's was in a strip club he owned on the west side of Savannah. Noah scouted the location, studying the guards, security cameras, and access points. It was built like a fortress, but that didn't matter. He had infiltrated enemy compounds overseas. This was no different. The plan was simple. Slip in, destroy Rico's money, and leave no trace of who did it. Midnight. The club was packed. Loud music, flashing lights, drunk men throwing wads of cash. Noah moved through the crowd like a shadow. Invisible. Unnoticed. His eyes locked on a VIP entrance guarded by 2 men. Rico's cash was inside. Noah needed a way in. A distraction. He spotted a waitress carrying a tray of drinks. In a single smooth motion, he slipped a small pill into one of the cocktails. Nothing deadly, just enough to knock someone out. He waited. Watched. 5 minutes later, one of the guards stumbled, his face turning pale. Then he collapsed. The other guard panicked, calling for help. Noah moved. Fast. A quick strike to the throat, a sharp twist of the wrist. The second guard went down without a sound. Noah took his ID badge and disappeared inside. The vault was unguarded. Noah cracked it open. Stacks of dirty money filled the shelves. Millions in cash. He doused the bills in lighter fluid. Pulled out a flare. Lit the place up. The flames roared, devouring Rico's fortune. Noah walked away without looking back. By the time the fire alarm went off, it was too late. Rico had just lost everything. Chapter 11: Rico's Meltdown. Rico Alvarez wasn't just angry. He was terrified. The fire had wiped out millions. His men whispered behind his back. Some even suspected it was an inside job. But Rico knew better. This was Noah. The same man who had survived war zones, taken down terrorist cells, and trained in psychological warfare. And now he was hunting him. Rico grabbed Vanessa by the wrist, his grip crushing. "You said he was weak," he snarled. "You said he wouldn't fight back." Vanessa trembled. I didn't think he would." "Well, he is." Rico shoved her aside, breathing heavily. His mind raced. He had 2 options. Run and disappear. Fight back. He had never run before. And he wouldn't start now. But if he wanted to stop Noah, he had to change the game. He had to hit Noah where it hurt. And that meant digging into his past. Chapter 12: Digging Up Ghosts. Rico knew men in high places. Dirty cops. Corrupt officials. Black market informants. He paid them to find everything there was to know about Noah Callahan. Military records. Family history. Past trauma. Anything that could be used as a weapon. And then he found something interesting. Noah had a sister. Noah was sitting in his truck, cleaning his knife, when his phone buzzed. Unknown number. "You wanted a war, soldier?" Unknown number. "Let's see how tough you are when family is on the line." An image popped up. A photo of his sister, Caroline. Noah's blood ran cold. Rico had just made the biggest mistake of his life. Chapter 13: The Unforgivable Mistake. Noah Callahan sat in his truck, gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. He stared at the image on his phone, his sister Caroline, tied to a chair. A bruised cheek. Terror in her eyes. Rico had made a mistake. A massive, irreversible mistake. This was no longer about revenge. This was personal. Noah took a slow, deep breath. Emotions couldn't control him. Not now. Not when so much was at stake. He closed his eyes and pushed the rage aside. Strategy. Precision. Execution. That's what mattered. He needed to find Caroline. Fast. First step. Identify Rico's location. Noah pulled out his burner phone and dialed an old contact. James "Mac" McAllister, an ex-military buddy turned private investigator. Mac answered on the first ring. "Noah? Been a while, brother. No time for catch-ups. I need an address. Now." Noah forwarded the picture of Caroline. Rico Alvarez took her. Mac whistled. "Damn. I was hoping you'd just call to grab a beer." Noah remained silent. Mac sighed. "All right. Gimme 30 minutes. I'll find him. Noah checked his weapons while waiting. 2 handguns. A combat knife. Extra ammo. He wasn't just going to rescue Caroline. He was going to make an example out of Rico. His phone buzzed. Mac had sent him an address. An abandoned motel on the outskirts of town. Noah started the engine. Time to end this. Chapter 14, The Rescue Mission. The motel sat in the middle of nowhere, a broken-down relic of forgotten times. Windows were boarded up, neon signs flickered weakly, and a single dim bulb lit the parking lot. Noah pulled up a safe distance away. He counted 4 guards outside. Amateurs. He moved fast. Silent. A shadow in the night. The first guard leaned against the wall, smoking a cigarette. Noah grabbed him from behind, clamping a hand over his mouth while slicing his throat in one swift motion. 1 down. The second guard heard the faint noise, turning just in time to see Noah's blade sink into his chest. 2 down. The third and fourth guards were inside, standing by the door. Noah picked up a discarded beer bottle and hurled it against a dumpster. The loud crash made the men turn instinctively. That was their mistake. Noah rushed in, snapping one man's neck before putting a bullet in the other's head. All clear. Now Caroline. Noah kicked open the door to room 103. Caroline was there, tied to a chair, gagged. Bruised but alive. The thug guarding her barely had time to react before Noah put 2 bullets in his skull. He rushed to Caroline, untying her restraints. Are you okay? Caroline coughed, nodding frantically. I don't know what's happening. He just grabbed me. Noah's voice was calm but firm. You're safe now. She looked up at him, fear mixing with something else. Trust. She knew her brother would never let anything happen to her. But Noah wasn't done yet. Because now he had one last piece of business left. Rico. Chapter 15, The Warehouse Massacre. Rico was celebrating. He sat in his penthouse, drinking whiskey, laughing with his men, thinking he had won. He had sent a message to Noah. Taken something from him. Made him bleed. But what Rico didn't know. Noah wasn't the type of man to bleed and not return the favor. The call came in while Rico was pouring another drink. A panicked voice. Boss, we got a problem. Rico frowned. What now? It's Callahan. He's hitting the warehouse right now. Rico's stomach dropped. Which warehouse? The one with gunfire. Screams. Then silence. The line went dead. Rico's heart pounded. He turned to his men, barking orders. We're moving. Now. Meanwhile, across town, Noah was already inside Rico's main warehouse. He moved like a storm of death. Gunshots. Bodies dropping. Blood splattering. Every man who worked for Rico fell before they even knew what hit them. Noah's knife found throats. His bullets found skulls. This wasn't just an attack. This was a message. A declaration of war. By the time the last of Rico's men fell, Noah stood alone, breathing heavily, his boots soaked in blood. He grabbed a crate of Rico's stolen military weapons and set them ablaze. The flames roared high. Noah pulled out his burner phone and dialed Rico's number. Rico picked up, his voice laced with panic. Noah spoke just 3 words. You're next, Rico. Then he hung up and walked out of the burning warehouse. Chapter 16, Vanessa's Betrayal. Vanessa had never felt fear like this before. Sitting in Rico's penthouse, she gripped the edges of her chair, heart pounding as Rico threw a whiskey glass against the wall. He's tearing everything apart. Rico shouted, pacing the room like a caged animal. His face was twisted with rage, but underneath she saw something else. Fear. The call from Noah had shaken him. You're next, Rico. Vanessa had heard those words too. And she knew what they meant. Noah wasn't bluffing. Her husband, the man she had laughed at, the man she had betrayed, was coming. And he wasn't stopping until Rico was dead. Rico slammed a fist against the table. We need to move. Now. Before that psycho comes for me. Vanessa took a shaky breath. Rico. Maybe we should just. He turned on her so fast she flinched. Don't. Say. Surrender. His voice was cold, dangerous. Vanessa swallowed hard. I just mean maybe we should disappear. Lay low. Leave the city. Rico narrowed his eyes. You think I'm running from him? She didn't answer. Because yes, that's exactly what she thought. She had underestimated Noah. She had assumed he would be broken, humiliated, too weak to fight back. But he wasn't weak. He was a goddamn monster in war. And Rico had poked the wrong beast. That's when she made a decision. A desperate, selfish, last resort decision. If Noah was coming for Rico, she would make sure she was on the winning side. Chapter 17, The Deal with the Devil. Vanessa wasn't an idiot. She knew what happened to loose ends. And she was one. If Rico lost this war, he wouldn't take her with him. He'd leave her behind or worse, kill her himself. Noah was her only chance of survival. That's why that same night she reached out. She waited until Rico was drunk, asleep in his chair, before sneaking into the bathroom with a burner phone she had hidden weeks ago. Dialed Noah's number. Rang. She clenched her teeth, her entire body trembling. Then he answered. Silence. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then Noah's voice came through, calm and deadly. You've got some nerve calling me, Vanessa? She swallowed. Noah, please just listen. I should kill you too. You know that, right? Her breath hitched. But she pushed forward. I can help you. Pause. Then a soft, dangerous chuckle. You think I need your help? Vanessa closed her eyes, desperation clawing at her throat. Rico doesn't trust me anymore. He's getting paranoid. He's going to make a move soon. I know where he's going. Another pause. Then Noah's voice dropped to a whisper. Give me what I want, Vanessa. And maybe I'll let you live. Her blood went cold. Noah wasn't her husband anymore. He was something else now. Something worse. And she had just made a deal with the devil. Chapter 18, The Setup. Vanessa had done her part. She had fed Rico false information. Told him that Noah was planning to attack a warehouse on the east side of town. It was a lie. But Rico bought it. And he was sending all his men there. Meanwhile, Noah was preparing for the real strike. A direct assault on Rico himself. 11:45 p.m., Rico's penthouse. The streets below were eerily quiet. Noah crouched on the rooftop of a nearby building, his rifle in hand. He had been watching for hours. Studying Rico's habits. His weak points. Vanessa had given him the final piece of the puzzle. Rico's private escape route. A secret underground parking garage with a single exit. That's where Noah would be waiting. He checked his watch. Almost time. Inside, Rico was still drinking, oblivious. Noah smirked. Good. Stay drunk. Make it easier for me. He pulled out his phone, texting Vanessa one last time. Noah, he leaves in 10 minutes. You better be gone by then. Vanessa, I will be. Noah, if you're lying, you die first. Pause. Then her reply. Vanessa, I know. Noah tucked the phone away. Checked his gun. Took a deep breath. Then he moved. Tonight, Rico Alvarez dies. Chapter 19, Rico's last night alive. Rico Alvarez had no idea that this would be his last night on Earth. He sat in his penthouse, drinking expensive whiskey, convinced that he was still in control. The warehouse fire had been a setback. The money loss had stung. But in his mind he was still the king of Savannah. Noah Callahan? Just a thorn in his side. An annoyance. Rico had survived wars in the streets, taken down rivals, and built an empire from nothing. He wasn't going to let one vengeful soldier take it all away. Or so he thought. Because at this very moment, Noah was waiting in the shadows. Watching. Planning. Getting ready to strike. 12:10 a.m., the private garage. The underground parking garage was silent. Rico's private exit. A single ramp leading out to the street. A perfect bottleneck. Noah crouched behind a concrete pillar, heart steady, breath controlled. In his hands, a silenced pistol. He had already taken out the 2 guards patrolling the area. Quick, clean kills. Now all that was left was Rico himself. Inside the penthouse. Rico poured himself another drink, oblivious. He glanced at Vanessa. She was nervous. Too nervous. His instincts flared. Something was off. He narrowed his eyes. You sure about that intel, babe? Vanessa nodded quickly. Yes. Noah's attacking the East Side warehouse. I heard him talking on the phone. You should go now. Rico stared at her for a long moment. Something didn't feel right. But he was too drunk to think straight. With a grunt, he stood up. Fine. I'll deal with it myself. Vanessa barely hid her relief. She had done it. She had set him up. Now she just needed to get out before it was too late. 12:15 a.m., Rico steps into the garage. The second the doors to the private elevator opened, Noah was ready. Rico stepped out, flanked by two of his best bodyguards. The moment they took their first step into the open, Noah fired. Two silenced shots. One guard collapsed instantly, blood pooling beneath him. The other one spun around, reaching for his gun. Noah put a bullet through his head. Rico stumbled back, eyes wide. Finally he understood. Noah wasn't some annoyance. He was death itself. Rico turned to run. Big mistake. Noah fired again, hitting Rico in the leg. The gangster screamed, collapsing onto the pavement. He crawled toward his car, blood trailing behind him, panic setting in. Noah walked toward him slowly, calmly, like a predator taking its time with wounded prey. Rico reached for his gun. Noah kicked it away. Then he knelt beside Rico, lowered his gun, and smiled. Not so fun when the tables are turned, huh? Rico panted, blood dripping from his mouth. You really think this ends with me? He coughed. You kill me, someone else takes my place. Noah stared at him. Unbothered. Unmoved. Maybe, he said. But it won't be you. And then he pulled the trigger. A single, clean shot. The bullet ripped through Rico's skull. His body went still. It was over. Rico Alvarez was dead. Noah stood up, exhaling slowly. One enemy down. But he wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. Chapter 20, Who's Next? The next morning the news was everywhere. Breaking news, drug kingpin Rico Alvarez found dead in his private garage. The city was in shock. The police were scrambling. No suspects. No leads. Just one dead gangster. And a power vacuum. Because when a man like Rico dies, his enemies come crawling out of the shadows. And no one knew it. Meanwhile, Vanessa sat in her apartment, staring at the news, her hands shaking. She should have felt relieved. But she wasn't. Because she knew the truth. Noah wasn't done yet. And if she wasn't careful, she would be next. Now let me ask you something. Do you think Vanessa can escape Noah's wrath? Or is she just fooling herself? The war isn't over yet. Hit that subscribe button because the next chapters are going to be even more intense. Drop your predictions below. Who do you think will be Noah's next target? Stay tuned. The real game has just begun. Chapter 21, The Power Vacuum. Rico was dead. But Savannah's criminal underworld didn't die with him. If anything, his death created an even bigger problem. Every gang in the city wanted to take his place. The streets erupted in violence. Shootings. Turf wars. Bodies piling up. The cops were overwhelmed. The city was descending into chaos. And Noah? Noah was watching. Waiting. Because this wasn't over. Not yet. Chapter 22, The Wolves Move In. Noah had expected chaos after Rico's death. But not this fast. Less than 24 hours after the crime boss hit the pavement, Savannah's underworld turned into a battleground. Gang factions were at war. Everyone wanted to claim Rico's empire, his drug routes, his stolen weapons. And when criminals fight over power, civilians pay the price. Drive-by shootings. Firebombed businesses. Bodies piling up in alleyways. The city was bleeding. Noah wasn't surprised. He had seen it before, in Afghanistan and Iraq. A king falls and the vultures feast. But this wasn't just about gangs killing each other. This was unfinished business. Because Rico's allies, the men who had helped him, protected him, profited from his empire, they weren't just going to let Noah walk away. They wanted revenge. And the first place they'd look? Vanessa. She was hiding. Ever since Noah killed Rico, she had gone underground. Changed apartments. Used burner phones. Tried to vanish. But deep down she knew the truth. No matter how far she ran, she would never outrun Noah. And neither would the men coming after her. That night she locked her doors, closed the blinds, and held her breath. Outside, a car rolled to a stop. Engine idling. She knew that sound. Her pulse pounded. And then gunfire. Bullets shredded the windows, tearing through the walls. Vanessa hit the floor, covering her head, screaming. They found her. And just like that, the hunt was on. Chapter 23, The First Mistake. Noah was already watching. He had been tracking Rico's old crew, knowing they'd retaliate. So when he saw the black SUV pull up outside Vanessa's hideout, he wasn't surprised. He had been expecting them. What they didn't expect. Noah was already inside. Vanessa was still on the floor, heart racing, gasping for air. Then the front door slammed open. Boots. Voices. Men coming in, weapons drawn. She tried to crawl backward, panic rising, until a hand covered her mouth. She almost screamed, until she saw who it was. Noah. His eyes were cold, focused, dangerous. "Stay down," he whispered. Then he moved. One man entered the hallway. Noah grabbed him from behind, snapping his neck in a single brutal motion. Another one came through the kitchen, a silenced shot to the head. Fast, clean, efficient. The last two didn't even have time to react. Noah took them down without mercy. And just like that, the house was silent. Vanessa looked up at him, trembling. Noah wiped the blood off his hands. "Pack your shit," he said. "We're leaving." Chapter 24, The Final Bargain. Vanessa had never felt this powerless. She sat in the passenger seat of Noah's truck, hands shaking. Everything was happening too fast. She had spent years under Rico's protection, thinking she was untouchable. Now he was dead. And the wolves were tearing each other apart. And the only person who could keep her alive? The man she betrayed. Noah drove in silence, his jaw clenched, his grip tight on the wheel. She stole glances at him. He wasn't the same man she had married. He was harder, colder, darker. "You used me," Noah said suddenly, his voice low. Vanessa swallowed. You stole my money. You laughed in my face. You helped him." She couldn't deny it. So she did the only thing she could. She begged. "I was scared, Noah. I didn't have a choice." Noah's knuckles went white. "You always had a choice," he muttered. Silence. She licked her lips, forcing herself to stay calm. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. Noah didn't answer right away. Then finally, "Because killing you now is too easy." Vanessa's blood turned ice cold. She realized in that moment, she wasn't saved. She was being kept alive. For something far worse. Chapter 25, The Road to Nowhere. Vanessa sat in the passenger seat, staring at the road ahead, unsure whether she was safer inside this truck or outside it. Noah hadn't spoken for miles. His face was unreadable, his hands steady on the wheel. He had saved her life. But not out of mercy. She could still hear his voice in her head. "Because killing you now is too easy." She swallowed hard. What did that mean? She wanted to ask. Wanted to plead, bargain, do anything to survive. But one look at Noah's face and she knew, talking wouldn't save her now. Nothing would. The tires hummed against the asphalt as they left the city behind, heading deep into the backroads of Georgia. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Vanessa gathered the courage to speak. "Noah," she said softly. His grip on the wheel tightened. "You don't have to do this," she whispered. "I can leave. I can disappear. You never have to see me again." A slow breath. A muscle in his jaw twitched. "That's the problem, Vanessa," Noah said. "You think this is about you." She swallowed. "Isn't it?" Noah finally turned his head, his cold, steely eyes locking onto hers. "This is about cleaning up the mess you made," he said. Vanessa shrank into her seat. She had no idea what that meant. But she was about to find out. Chapter 26, A Ghost from the Past. Noah pulled off onto a gravel road, surrounded by nothing but pine trees and shadows. The headlights barely cut through the darkness as he brought the truck to a stop. Vanessa's heartbeat pounded. "Where are we?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Noah didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped out of the truck, slamming the door behind him. Vanessa hesitated, then followed. The night air was thick, suffocating. Asterisk, asterisk, and eerily quiet. Asterisk, asterisk. Then she saw it. A cabin. Old, abandoned, falling apart. A place with a history. Noah stepped onto the porch and turned, his expression unreadable. "This is where it started," he said. Vanessa frowned. "Where what started?" Noah exhaled slowly, eyes drifting to the trees. "The first time I killed a man." A chill ran down Vanessa's spine. She had always known Noah was capable of violence. But hearing it out loud? Knowing she was standing in the very place where he had taken a life? It made everything too real. She took a step back. "Why are we here?" Noah's gaze snapped back to her, sharp as a blade. "You want to survive, Vanessa?" She nodded, heart hammering. "Then you're gonna help me take down every last one of Rico's men." Her breath hitched. "What?" Noah stepped closer, voice low, dangerous. "You know the players. You know their locations. And now you work for me." Vanessa's stomach twisted. This wasn't a choice. This was an order. And refusing? That wasn't an option. Chapter 27, First Blood. Vanessa had never held a gun before. But now she was standing in a dimly lit alleyway, a Glock pressed into her palm, Noah's voice low in her ear. "Keep your hands steady," he said. "Breathe through it." Her hands were anything but steady. Noah was watching her, his eyes unreadable. "You wanted to be with killers, Vanessa," he said softly. "Now's your chance to prove you can survive with them." She swallowed. "I don't want to kill anyone." Noah smirked. "You already have. You just didn't pull the trigger." Her stomach twisted. He was right. She had enabled Rico, helped him steal, funded his empire. She was just as guilty as the men who had actually done the killing. And now she was in too deep to turn back. Noah stepped aside, revealing the man tied to a chair in front of her. One of Rico's last remaining lieutenants. Blood dripped from his nose. He had already been beaten, weakened. No threat. Noah crouched beside him, tilting his head. "You remember Vanessa, don't you?" The man spat blood. "Screw you." Noah chuckled. "That's not very polite." He turned to Vanessa. "Do it." Her hands trembled. I can't." Noah sighed. Then, before she could react, he grabbed the gun from her hands and fired a single shot into the man's knee. The man screamed. Vanessa jumped back, covering her mouth. Noah held the gun back out to her. "Now finish it." Her breath shook. She looked into the man's terrified, pain-filled eyes. Then she looked at Noah. And she saw the truth. If she didn't pull the trigger, he would. And if she failed this test, she was next. Her hands tightened around the gun. She had a choice. No, she had no choice. Her finger pressed against the trigger. A single shot rang through the alley. The man slumped over. Dead. The gun clattered to the ground. Vanessa staggered back, shaking violently. Noah just watched her. Unmoved. Unshaken. "Welcome to the war," he said. Chapter 28, The Cost of Blood. Vanessa stood frozen, staring at the lifeless body on the ground. Her ears rang. The gun was still warm in her hands. The man's blood pooled beneath him, soaking into the cracked pavement. She had killed someone. For years she had been close to this world. She had been Rico's lover, spent his money, lived in luxury funded by violence and crime. But until now she had never been the one to pull the trigger. And now, she couldn't take it back. Noah stood beside her, watching, his expression unreadable. There was no sympathy in his eyes. "You did what had to be done," he said. Vanessa turned to him, her voice barely above a whisper. "You made me do this." Noah tilted his head. "Did I?" She clenched her fists, her breathing ragged. "You." Noah stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I didn't force you to pull that trigger, Vanessa. You did it because deep down, you knew there was no other way." Her stomach twisted. He was right. She could have refused, could have tried to run. But she hadn't. Because she knew Noah wouldn't have let her walk away. And now she was part of this. Noah turned away and stepped over the body like it was nothing. "We're not done." Vanessa stared at him in horror. "How can you be so cold about this?" she stammered. Noah paused at the alley's exit. "Because I've done worse." Then he disappeared into the night. Vanessa took one last look at the body, guilt clawing at her insides. Then she followed him. Chapter 29, The Last Pieces Fall. Noah drove in silence, his mind turning over everything. Rico's men were scattering like rats. Some were dead, others laying low, waiting for the dust to settle. But there were still a few loose ends. He needed to finish this. And Vanessa? She was now a weapon he could use. They stopped outside a rundown motel on the outskirts of town. Vanessa looked around, her nerves on edge. "Why are we here?" Noah didn't answer. Instead he stepped inside. Vanessa hesitated, then followed. Inside, the motel smelled of cheap whiskey and sweat. And sitting at the back table? Marcus DeLuca, Rico's last remaining ally. A middleman in the drug trade. Smart enough to know when to run. The second Marcus saw Noah, he tensed. "Noah Callahan," he muttered. "I was hoping we wouldn't have to do this." Noah pulled out his gun. "Then you should have stayed out of it." Marcus's jaw tightened. "You think killing me ends this?" Noah smirked. "No, but it'll make me feel better." Before Marcus could react, Vanessa spoke up. "We don't have to do this," she blurted. Noah shot her a warning glance, but she ignored it. Marcus, listen. Rico is dead. The city's burning. You can still walk away. Just give us what we need. Marcus hesitated. He wasn't a fool. He knew if he said the wrong thing, he'd leave this motel in a body bag. Finally, he exhaled. Fine. But after this, I'm done. Noah nodded. Then talk. And Marcus did. He told them who was still left. Who was trying to take over Rico's territory. Where they were meeting tonight. By the time he was done, Noah had everything he needed. Marcus stood, hands raised. We done. Noah's grip on the gun tightened. For a moment, Vanessa thought he was going to shoot him anyway. But then he lowered the weapon. Yeah, he muttered. We're done. Marcus didn't waste another second. He ran. Vanessa let out a breath. She had just saved a man's life. But she knew Noah wasn't done. Not yet. Chapter 30, The Call Before the Storm. The night air was thick with tension. Noah and Vanessa sat in the truck, preparing for the final strike. The last of Rico's men were meeting at an abandoned shipyard. The perfect place for a slaughter. Noah loaded his gun, checked his knife, prepared his gear. Vanessa watched him, her throat dry. You're going to kill them all, aren't you? Noah didn't answer. Because the answer was obvious. She swallowed. And after that? Noah finally looked at her. After that, I'm done. She frowned. What does that mean? Noah stared out at the dark road ahead. It meant that after tonight there would be no one left to hunt. No more enemies to fight. And once the war was over, Noah Callahan wouldn't have a purpose anymore. Vanessa felt a strange, unexpected ache in her chest. For the first time she realized she was afraid. Afraid that once this was done, Noah would disappear. Maybe not physically, but emotionally. She had already lost Rico. And now she was about to lose Noah too. She wasn't sure why that mattered to her. But it did. Chapter 31, The Final Battlefield. The abandoned shipyard stretched along the coastline, a maze of rusted cargo containers, decaying warehouses and darkness. The sea was calm, but the air was thick with tension, as if even the ocean knew what was about to happen. Noah sat inside the truck, his fingers tightening around the grip of his silenced pistol. Next to him, Vanessa sat stiff, her hands clutching her seatbelt like it was a lifeline. He had already scouted the area. 15 men. Armed. Trained. Desperate. They weren't just foot soldiers. These were Rico's top lieutenants, the ones who had survived the chaos after his death. The ones still hoping to take control of the remains of his empire. Too bad they wouldn't live long enough to see it. Noah turned to Vanessa. You stay in the truck, he ordered. Vanessa swallowed. What if something goes wrong? Noah's lips curled into something that was almost a smile. It won't. Then he was gone. Into the night. Into the hunt. Noah moved like a shadow, slipping between the containers, unseen, unheard. The first two guards stood near the entrance, smoking cigarettes, completely unaware that death was already in the air. Noah struck fast. A knife to the first man's throat, blood gurgled as he collapsed. Before the second could react, Noah clamped a hand over his mouth and stabbed him between the ribs. 2 down. He dragged the bodies into the darkness and kept moving. At the center of the yard, a group of men stood around a makeshift table, guns laid out, stacks of cash piled high. One of them, Carlos Ortega, Rico's right-hand man, leaned over a map, barking orders. Tomorrow we wipe out the Morales crew, Carlos was saying. This city still belongs to us. Noah smirked. Wrong. The silencer whispered. A bullet slammed into the first man's skull. Before the others could react, Noah was already moving. 1 shot. 2 shots. 3. Men dropped. Blood sprayed. Carlos grabbed his gun, firing wildly. Missed. Noah didn't. He shot Carlos in the leg, sending him crashing to the ground, screaming. The rest were dead. Only Carlos remained. Noah stalked forward, gun raised. Carlos coughed, his face contorted with pain. You think this stops anything? Noah knelt beside him. No. But it stops you. Then he pulled the trigger. Carlos's body went limp. The war was over. Noah stood, looking around at the carnage. Every last one of Rico's men was dead. He took a breath. For the first time in years he felt nothing. No satisfaction. No anger. Just silence. Chapter 32, A Deal with the Devil. Noah walked back to the truck, his boots heavy with blood and dirt. Vanessa sat in the passenger seat, her face pale, her hands gripping her knees. She didn't ask what happened. She knew. The war was finished. But the story wasn't over yet. Noah sat down, started the engine, and pulled onto the road. Vanessa finally spoke. What happens now? Noah's eyes stayed on the road. Now we disappear. Vanessa's breath hitched. We. He didn't answer. Because the truth was, he didn't know. They drove in silence until Noah pulled into an empty gas station. He grabbed his phone. Dialed a number. Mac picked up on the first ring. Tell me it's done. It's done, Noah said. They're all dead. Mac sighed. Then you need to leave. No. The feds are sniffing around. Rico's death made them nervous. It won't be long before they start looking for someone to blame. Noah's grip tightened on the wheel. Of course they were watching. How much time do I have? He asked. Not enough, Mac muttered. If you're smart, you'll be gone before sunrise. Noah exhaled. That was always the plan. Disappear. Erase himself from the city. But then, his eyes flickered to Vanessa. And suddenly things weren't so simple anymore. Chapter 33, The Final Loose End. Noah killed the engine outside a rundown motel, the neon NO vacancy sign buzzing faintly in the darkness. Vanessa shifted in her seat. Why are we stopping? Noah turned to her. Because this is where we say goodbye. Vanessa froze. Noah pulled a duffel bag from the back seat and tossed it onto her lap. Cash. IDs. Everything you need to start over. Vanessa's hands trembled as she gripped the bag. Noah. This was never about saving you, he said, voice low, firm. It was about finishing what you started. She blinked back tears. And that's it. Noah's jaw clenched. It should have been that simple. But nothing about Vanessa had ever been simple. You got what you wanted, he said, nodding toward the bag. Now go. For a long moment she just stared at him. Then she reached for the door handle. Paused. You could come with me, she said softly. Noah's chest tightened. The thought had crossed his mind. But deep down he knew the truth. Vanessa belonged to a world he was trying to leave behind. And he was nothing but a ghost now. No, he said finally. I couldn't. Vanessa swallowed hard, nodded. And then she was gone. Noah watched as she disappeared into the night, unsure if he'd ever see her again. Maybe it was better that way. Because in the end, some ghosts were meant to stay buried. Chapter 34, The Ghost in the Rearview. Noah sat in his truck, the engine humming softly beneath his fingers. The motel's neon sign flickered behind him, casting broken shadows across the dashboard. Vanessa was gone. She had walked away, clutching the bag of money and forged IDs like they were salvation. He should have felt relief. Instead, all he felt was emptiness. He exhaled slowly, gripping the wheel. It was over. Rico's men were dead. His empire had burned. And Vanessa, she had her second chance. Noah had nothing left to do but disappear. The plan was simple. Drive south. Cross the border. Become a ghost. It was what he had always planned. So why the hell couldn't he make himself drive? His fingers tapped against the wheel. His mind turned over the last few weeks, the blood, the bodies, the war. Then, a flash of movement in the rearview mirror. His instincts flared. A car. Headlights flickering in the distance. Noah's gut twisted. Someone was following him. His heart rate didn't spike. He had trained for this, lived for this. He had expected it. With one final glance at the motel, he put the truck into gear and drove. Whoever was behind him. They had just made the worst mistake of their life. Chapter 35. The Hunter Becomes the Hunted. The road stretched ahead, dark and empty, flanked by nothing but thick trees and scattered gas stations. The car stayed in his rear view, never getting too close, never dropping back. It wasn't a coincidence. Noah knew a tale when he saw one. His fingers curled around his gun, the weight familiar, comforting. Time to find out who wanted to die tonight. He took the next exit, leading onto a side road that wound through an abandoned industrial park. No cameras. No traffic. The perfect place to kill. The car followed. Noah pulled into an empty lot, cut the engine and waited. Seconds later the other car rolled in, its headlights shutting off. A door opened. Boots crunched against the pavement. And then, a voice. Didn't think you'd notice me that fast. Noah's grip tightened. That voice. He stepped out, gun raised, ready to fire. Then stopped. Because standing in front of him, hands raised in surrender, was Mac. Noah's eyes narrowed. "You're following me now?" Mac sighed, stuffing his hands in his jacket pockets. "I had to." Noah didn't lower the gun. "Why?" Mac stared at him for a long moment. Then he said the last thing Noah expected. "Because you're not done yet." Chapter 36. One last name on the list. Noah's jaw clenched. "The hell does that mean?" Mac exhaled, stepping closer. "I know you think you tied up all the loose ends. But you missed one." Noah didn't blink. "I don't miss." Mac gave him a grim look. "You missed this one." He pulled out his phone, swiped through and held up a picture. Noah's stomach turned to ice. The image was grainy, taken from a security feed. But the face? The face he recognized. Lieutenant Frank Dawson. Corrupt. Dirty. Bought and paid for by Rico years ago. But he hadn't been in the city when everything went down. He had been in Miami. And now, he was back. Max slipped the phone into his pocket. "If you leave now he gets away," he said. "He rebuilds. He fills the void you left." Noah's pulse thundered. He thought it was over. He thought he could walk away. But now one last name was left on the list. And Noah couldn't let that stand. Mac watched him carefully. "So tell me, Callahan." A slow, knowing smirk crept onto his face. "You still think you're done?" Noah took a deep breath. Then, with the kind of certainty that came from knowing exactly what he had to do, he got back in the truck. The hunt wasn't over. Not yet. Chapter 37. The name that should have been dead. Noah had spent years hunting men like Frank Dawson. Corrupt. Ruthless. The type of man who didn't just play in the dirt but rolled in it. Dawson wasn't just a dirty cop. He was Rico's fixer. The man who made bodies disappear. The one who bought silence. Noah had assumed Dawson was out of the picture, fled when Rico's empire collapsed. He had been wrong. And now, Dawson was back. And if there was one thing Noah knew about men like him, they didn't return unless they were trying to build something new. That meant Dawson wasn't just another loose end. He was the start of a new problem. And Noah wasn't about to let that happen. They pulled into a gas station. The night was quiet, too quiet. Mac parked next to Noah, stepping out of his car with a sigh. "I get it, man," Mac said. "You thought you were done." Noah leaned against his truck, crossing his arms. "I was." Mac raised an eyebrow. "Then why the hell aren't you driving away?" Noah didn't answer. Because they both knew the truth. Men like him didn't just walk away. They buried their demons. And when one crawled back out of the grave, you put a bullet in its head. Mac pulled out his phone, swiped through a few messages and handed it to Noah. "Dawson's been in and out of Miami for months," he explained. "Setting up new connections, working with people we don't want in this city." Noah scanned the files. Drug shipments. Payoffs. Dawson was trying to rebuild Rico's empire. And if he succeeded, everything Noah had done would mean nothing. He exhaled slowly, handing the phone back. Mac smirked. "That's the look I was waiting for." Noah rolled his shoulders. "Where is he?" Mac grinned. "Now that's the right question." Chapter 38. The Man with Too Many Lives. Dawson had always been careful. But this time? He got sloppy. Mac's sources had tracked him to a high-end nightclub on the riverfront, a place only the rich and the dangerous frequented. Noah didn't hesitate. This wasn't about tactics anymore. This was about sending a message. Dawson had slipped away once. It wasn't happening again. 11:45 p.m., the Red Velvet nightclub. The club was a tower of glass and steel, the kind of place where politicians and criminals drank in the same VIP booths. Noah walked through the front doors like he belonged there. The bass pulsed. Lights flickered. Laughter mixed with expensive whiskey. And at the far end of the room, sitting in a corner booth with 2 bodyguards and a cocktail in hand, Frank Dawson. The bastard hadn't changed much. Same smug face. Same arrogance. The only difference? Tonight he was going to die. Noah approached the bar, ordered a drink he had no intention of touching, and waited. Dawson was mid-conversation, laughing at some joke, completely unaware that his executioner was in the same room. Noah exhaled slowly. He had 2 choices. Make a scene. Kill Dawson where he sat. Let the whole city know he was back. Wait. Lure him outside. Make it personal. He chose the latter. Because Frank Dawson didn't deserve a quick death. He deserved to know exactly why he was dying. Chapter 39. The Wrong Turn. Noah followed Dawson out. It didn't take long. Men like Dawson never stayed in one place for too long. Too many enemies. Too many bad deals. At 1 a.m., Dawson finally moved, stepping out the back exit with his 2 guards. Noah was already there. Waiting. Dawson barely had time to register what was happening before Noah stepped out of the shadows. Gun drawn. Silenced. 2 quick shots. Both bodyguards dropped before they even knew what hit them. Dawson froze. His whiskey glass slipped from his fingers, shattering against the pavement. His face went pale. Noah stepped closer. "Hello, Frank." Dawson swallowed. "Callahan." "Shit." Noah smirked. "That's your last word?" Dawson raised his hands, backing up. "Listen, man. This doesn't have to." Noah shot him in the leg. Dawson screamed, collapsing onto the pavement. Noah crouched down, pressing the gun against his forehead. "You should have stayed gone," he muttered. Dawson panted, blood soaking into the ground. You think this ends with me?" Noah's grip tightened. He had heard that before. Rico had said the same thing. And he had died all the same. Dawson chuckled weakly. "You can't kill them all, Callahan." Noah leaned closer. "Watch me." Then he pulled the trigger. A single shot. Dawson's skull cracked against the pavement. And just like that, the last loose end was tied. Noah exhaled. Finally it was over. Chapter 40, The Silence After Death. The city was quiet. For the first time in weeks, there were no gunshots, no bodies dropping, no whispers of revenge. Noah stood in the empty parking lot, the scent of gunpowder still thick in the air. Frank Dawson's body lay crumpled at his feet, blood soaking into the pavement. The last loose end. Dead. Noah should have felt something. Relief. Satisfaction. Closure. But all he felt was the wind against his face and the weight of the gun in his hand. He had spent his entire life fighting. For his country. For revenge. For justice. Now with no enemies left. What the hell was he supposed to do? 1:45 a.m. Abandoned overpass. Mac pulled up in his car, stepping out with a cigarette between his teeth. He eyed Dawson's body, then looked at Noah. "You done?" Mac asked. Noah didn't answer right away. Was he? Was there anyone else left to kill? Anyone else who deserved his wrath? Finally he exhaled. "Yeah." Mac studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Good. Then get the hell out of here before the cops start digging." Noah tossed his gun into a nearby dumpster, wiped his hands on his jeans. "Where are you going?" Mac asked. Noah opened the truck door. "Don't know yet." Mac smirked. "Bullshit. You know exactly where you're going." Noah paused, then slammed the door shut and drove. Chapter 41, The One Person Left. Noah had never been the kind of man to look back. But as the city lights faded in his rear view, he couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't quite done yet. Not with her. Vanessa. He had left her behind at that motel, given her money, told her to run. But something kept pulling him back. Maybe it was unfinished business. Maybe it was the fact that no matter how much he wanted to hate her, some part of him still couldn't let go. He drove through the night, heading toward the one place he had never expected to return. 3:12 a.m. Roadside Diner. Vanessa sat in a booth, stirring a cup of coffee, her hands trembling. She had been trying to convince herself that she was free, that she could start over, that she wasn't looking over her shoulder anymore. But she was lying to herself. She had spent years in Rico's world, Noah's world. Now she was stuck somewhere in between. She jumped when the bell over the diner's door rang. And when she turned to see who had walked in, her breath caught in her throat. Noah. His presence filled the room like a storm cloud. His boots thudded against the tile. His jacket was dusted with blood. And his eyes? They weren't cold anymore. They were calculating. Searching. For her. He slid into the booth across from her, resting his forearms on the table. For a long time neither of them spoke. Finally Vanessa swallowed hard. "I thought you were gone." Noah's voice was steady. "I was." A beat of silence. Then, "Why are you here?" she whispered. Noah leaned in, his eyes locked onto hers. "You tell me." Chapter 42, The Last War. The tension between them was thick, unspoken. Vanessa had no idea why he had come back. Did he regret letting her live? Was he here to finish the job? Or was it something worse? "All the people who wanted you dead are gone," Noah said. So why do you look like you're still running? Vanessa looked away. Because I am. Noah exhaled. Who is it? She hesitated. Then finally she spoke. Rico wasn't the only one I made deals with. Noah's fingers twitched. Who? Vanessa's throat tightened. His supplier. Noah's entire body went still. The supplier. The man who had kept Rico's empire stocked with weapons and drugs. The one Rico owed millions to. Noah had burned Rico's empire to the ground. But now someone wanted payment. And if they couldn't get it from Rico, they'd come for her instead. Noah exhaled slowly. You should have told me this before. Vanessa's hands curled into fists. Would you have stayed? Noah didn't answer. Because deep down he already knew the answer. Chapter 43. The Man Who Owned the Shadows. Noah sat in the diner booth, his fingers drumming against the table. Vanessa's revelation burned in his mind like a lit fuse. Rico wasn't the top of the chain. He had someone above him, a supplier. A real power. And now that Rico was dead, this man wanted his debt paid. Noah exhaled. He should have seen this coming. Who is he? Noah asked, his voice low, steady. Vanessa's hands trembled slightly as she stirred her coffee. I don't know his real name. Everyone just calls him, the broker. Noah's jaw tightened. He had heard that name before. Whispers in the underworld. A ghost with no face, no identity. But one thing was certain. The broker didn't forgive debts. And if he was coming for Vanessa? Noah had just found his next target. Chapter 44. The Blood Price. The broker wasn't like Rico. He didn't throw flashy parties. He didn't flaunt power. He didn't need to. Because everyone feared him. Rico had been a king in Savannah. But the broker? He ruled an empire that stretched across borders. And if he was sending men after Vanessa, it meant he was already watching. Noah pushed back from the table, tossing a few bills down. Let's go. Vanessa hesitated. Where? Noah looked at her, his eyes cold. To end this. She swallowed. You don't even know where he is. Noah smirked. Not yet. Then he turned to Mac, who had been quietly sipping his coffee at the counter. You still got those contacts? Noah asked. Mac exhaled, rubbing his temple. Man, I knew you weren't gonna let this go. Noah's smirk didn't fade. I need an address. Mac sighed, tossing some cash on the counter and standing up. Let's find your ghost. Chapter 45. The Hunt for the Ghost. Noah and Mac spent the next 12 hours digging through the underworld. Mac called his contacts. Noah leaned on old military sources. Every whisper, every rumor led them closer. And then, finally, they found him. The broker wasn't hiding. He was waiting. A private compound in the Florida Everglades. Fortified. Guarded. Nearly impenetrable. Mac whistled as they stared at the aerial shots. Damn. This guy's got more security than a war zone. Noah studied the blueprints. He had seen worse. You really gonna do this? Mac asked. Noah didn't even hesitate. Yeah. Mac exhaled, shaking his head. Then I hope you brought enough bullets. Noah smirked. Always. Vanessa stood behind them, her arms crossed. You can't just walk in there and kill him. Noah turned to her. Why not? Her voice dropped to a whisper. Because he's expecting you. Noah's smirk faded. She was right. The broker had let them find him. This wasn't just a battle. It was a trap. And Noah was walking straight into it. But that was fine. Because if the broker wanted a war, Noah Callahan was bringing hell with him. Chapter 46. Walking into the fire. The Florida Everglades were a different kind of battlefield. Dense trees. Muddy roads. A place where people disappeared without a trace. Noah sat in the passenger seat as Mac drove, the road ahead stretching into darkness. Vanessa sat in the back, arms crossed, eyes darting out the window. The compound wasn't far now. Noah checked his weapons. 2 silenced pistols, a combat knife, extra ammo. Mac glanced at him. You sure about this? Noah's expression didn't change. Yeah. Mac sighed. All right. But don't say I didn't warn you. The GPS pinged. They were 2 miles out. Noah glanced at Vanessa. You stay in the car. She shook her head. I can help. Noah exhaled, gripping the gun in his lap. Not this time. Vanessa looked like she wanted to argue, but something in Noah's eyes shut her up. She nodded. Max slowed the car, pulling off the road. They couldn't drive any closer. It was time to move on foot. Noah stepped out, his boots sinking into the damp earth. The air smelled of salt and gunmetal. And ahead? The broker's fortress. Noah checked his watch. It was time. Time to finish this. Chapter 47, The First Bullet Falls. Noah moved like a ghost. Through the trees. Past the guards. Silent. Deadly. Two men stood near the entrance, smoking cigarettes, laughing. Noah struck fast. A knife across the throat. Blood gurgled. A silenced shot to the skull. 2 down. More to go. He slipped inside the compound. Gun raised. Movements controlled. The broker's men weren't amateurs. They were professionals. But Noah? He was better. A guard turned the corner. Noah shot him twice. Just head. The body dropped. Another came running. Noah pivoted, firing. A clean shot through the eye. They were falling like dominoes. He kept moving. Through the hallways. Past the doors. Every bullet brought him closer. To the broker. To the man who thought he could win. To the end of the war. Chapter 48, The Face of the Enemy. Noah kicked open the final door. And there he was. The broker. Sitting behind a massive oak desk, whiskey in one hand, a cold smirk on his face. "I was wondering when you'd show up," the broker said. Noah didn't blink. "Stand up." The broker chuckled, swirling his drink. "You really think this ends with me?" Noah's finger tightened on the trigger. "It ends now." The broker sighed, placing his glass down. "You don't get it, do you, Callahan?" His smirk widened. "You were never the hunter. You were always the prey." A click. Then the sound of footsteps behind him. Noah spun. Too late. A gun pressed against the back of his head. A trap. And this time? Noah had walked right into it. Chapter 49, The Trap Closes. Noah didn't move. The cold steel of the gun pressed against the back of his skull, the soft click of the safety disengaging echoing through the office. He had walked right into it. The broker leaned back in his chair, still smirking, completely relaxed. "You're good, Callahan," he said, swirling his whiskey. "I'll give you that. But you're predictable." Noah's jaw clenched. He had miscalculated. The footsteps behind him shifted. A second guard. Maybe 2. "Drop the gun," the broker ordered. Slowly. Noah considered his options. If he moved too fast, he'd be dead before he hit the floor. If he obeyed, he'd be at the broker's mercy. And Noah had seen what happened to men at this bastard's mercy. He exhaled through his nose. "All right." Noah bent slightly, lowering his weapon. Then he struck. A brutal elbow backward, smashing into the guard's ribs. The man grunted, staggering, just enough of an opening. Noah pivoted, grabbing the gun barrel and twisting hard. A shot went off, but it wasn't his blood that hit the floor. The guard dropped. Dead. Noah grabbed the pistol from the man's twitching fingers, spun. Another gunshot. Pain exploded through his shoulder. Noah stumbled back, hissing through gritted teeth. The broker stood now, his own gun smoking. "See, that's the problem with men like you," he mused, shaking his head. "You don't know when you've already lost." Blood dripped down Noah's arm. But he wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. Chapter 50, The Last Stand. Noah ignored the pain, forcing himself to move. His body screamed, his vision blurred, but he had one shot left. The broker raised his gun again, aiming for Noah's head. Noah lunged. Fast. Desperate. He grabbed the broker's wrist, twisted. A gunshot. Then another. The room went still. Noah staggered back, panting. The broker blinked, staring down at his chest. Blood blossomed across his white shirt. He stumbled, dropping his gun. Noah caught him by the collar, pulling him close. "You should have killed me when you had the chance," he whispered. The broker coughed, blood dripping from his lips. "Doesn't matter. Another will take my place." Noah's grip tightened. Let them try. Then with a final push he let the broker fall. The man hit the floor and didn't move again. Noah stood over him, chest rising and falling, blood dripping from his own wound. It was over. For real this time. The war was finally over. Chapter 51, Ghosts of the Past. Noah stumbled out of the compound, the first rays of dawn painting the sky in soft orange and blue. Mac was waiting near the car, gun raised, eyes sharp. When he saw Noah, he exhaled. "Jesus, you look like hell." Noah smirked, blood staining his teeth. "Feel like it too." Mac opened the car door. Get in. Let's get you the hell out of here. Noah didn't argue. He sank into the passenger seat, head against the window. The road stretched ahead, endless. No more enemies. No more revenge. But for the first time, Noah had no idea where he was going. And that was the scariest part of all. Chapter 52, The Road to Nowhere. The highway stretched endlessly before them, miles of empty road and open sky. The weight of the last few weeks sat heavy on Noah's shoulders, but he wasn't thinking about the blood, the bodies, or the war. He was thinking about what came next. And for the first time in his life, he didn't have an answer. Mac drove in silence, the tension between them thick. He hadn't asked any questions, not about the broker, not about the bodies left behind. He knew better. Noah shifted, adjusting his shoulder. The wound still burned, but he had felt worse. Where to? Mac finally asked. Noah stared out the window, watching the sun rise over the horizon. He could go anywhere. Disappear like a ghost. But something inside him told him that even if he left, the past would never really let him go. I don't know, Noah admitted. Mac smirked. That's a first. They drove for a while longer before Mac pulled into a small roadside motel. You need rest, Mac said. And a plan. Noah didn't argue. He stepped out of the car, boots crunching against gravel, eyes scanning the quiet surroundings. The place was run down but quiet. Safe. For now. Mac handed him a burner phone. I'll be around if you need me. Noah nodded. Appreciate it. Mac hesitated. You ever gonna tell me why you went back for her? Noah tensed. Vanessa. He hadn't spoken to her since the diner. Hadn't decided if she was part of his past or his future. I don't know, Noah admitted. Mac sighed. Well, figure it out. 'Cause you don't strike me as the kind of guy who likes unfinished business. Then he left. Noah stood there watching his friend drive away, and for the first time in years he felt lost. Because Mac was right. Vanessa was unfinished business. And before this was truly over, he had to face her one last time. Chapter 53, The Final Decision. The motel room was silent. Noah sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the burner phone Mac had given him. It felt heavier than it should. The war was over. Every name on the list had been crossed out. Rico. His men. The corrupt cops. The broker. And yet, something still felt unfinished. Vanessa. She had survived everything. But what did that mean now? Noah had spent years running toward war. But now there was nothing left to fight. And for the first time he had a choice. Stay in the past. Or walk away for good. Noah clenched his jaw and dialed. The line rang once. Twice. Then, her voice. Noah? Vanessa sounded hesitant, unsure. Like she hadn't expected him to call. Silence stretched between them. What the hell was he even supposed to say? But Vanessa spoke first. You're alive, she said softly. Noah exhaled. Yeah. She hesitated. Is it over? Noah ran a hand through his hair, looking out the window at the dark sky. Yeah. It's over. More silence. Then Vanessa let out a breath, almost like she had been holding it in for weeks. I didn't think you'd call. Neither did I. She let out a soft, broken laugh. So why did you? What? Because she was the only thing left that wasn't dead and buried. Because as much as he wanted to erase her from his life, she was the last piece of a past he hadn't fully let go of. Because he wasn't sure if he was meant to hate her forever or if he had already forgiven her. Finally, Noah answered. I don't know. Vanessa was quiet for a long time. Then she asked, Where are you? He looked around the motel room. The peeling wallpaper. The buzzing light. Nowhere. More silence. Then, finally, Do you want to see me? Noah didn't answer right away. Because this wasn't about revenge anymore. This wasn't about war. This was about what came after. And for the first time in his life, he didn't know what that looked like. But maybe it was time to find out. Noah took a slow breath. And then, yeah, the end. Noah's war is over. But what happens after the fight is done? Does he walk away? Or does he let the past pull him back in? Now let me ask you something. Do you think Noah should give Vanessa a second chance? Or should he leave her in the past where she belongs? Drop your thoughts in the comments. If you love this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, share it with someone who loves a badass revenge story. Thank you for being part of this journey. More stories are coming. And trust me, you don't want to miss what's next.